You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
Discussions between the two leaders have since stalled with a larger peace deal.
10 ways J.D. Vance is a bigger Putin supporter than Trump. Examining the political stances of public figures requires a careful look at their statements, actions, and policy positions. Both President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance have faced scrutiny over their views on Russia and President Vladimir Putin. While Trump's relationship with Putin has been widely analyzed, recent developments suggest that Vance's support for Putin may be even more pronounced. Here are 10 ways in which J.D. Vance appears to exhibit stronger support for Putin compared to Donald Trump. 1. Direct confrontations with pro-Ukraine protesters. Vance has engaged in confrontations with pro-Ukraine activists, openly challenging their stance on U.S. support for Ukraine. His strong opposition to pro-Ukraine sentiment indicates a deeper alignment with the Kremlin's perspective, whereas Trump, while critical of aid to Ukraine, has not been as directly confrontational. To public criticism of U.S. support for Ukraine, Vance has repeatedly voiced opposition to the U.S. government's assistance to Ukraine, arguing that American resources should not be used to counter Russia's aggression. While Trump has expressed skepticism about aid to Ukraine, he has also made ambiguous remarks about supporting the country under certain conditions. Vance's stance, however, is more consistently against U.S. intervention. 3. Advocacy for lifting sanctions on Russia. Vance has advocated for easing or lifting economic sanctions on Russia, arguing that they harm U.S. economic interests more than they pressure Moscow. Trump, despite sometimes criticizing sanctions, largely kept them in place during his presidency. Vance's stance is more in line with Russian goals of avoiding economic penalties. For opposition to NATO expansion. One of Putin's main geopolitical goals is stopping NATO's expansion, and Vance has echoed similar concerns. He has expressed skepticism about NATO's role and has suggested that further expansion could provoke unnecessary tensions. While Trump often criticized NATO allies for not contributing enough, his position was more about financial obligations rather than outright opposition to NATO's enlargement. 5. Support for Russian military actions. Vance has made statements appearing to justify Russian military operations, particularly in Ukraine. He has suggested that Russia has legitimate security concerns that the West has ignored. Trump, despite praising Putin's leadership, has not explicitly defended Russia's military actions in the same way. 6. Critique of U.S. military presence in Eastern Europe. Vance has called for a reduction of U.S. troops in Eastern Europe, arguing that American involvement in the region is unnecessary. This position aligns with Putin's long-standing desire to see NATO forces reduced near Russia's borders. Trump, by contrast, pushed NATO allies to spend more on defense, but did not propose withdrawing U.S. forces from key locations. 7. Engagement with Russian political figures. Unlike Trump, who mostly engaged with Russian officials through formal diplomatic channels, Vance has shown a willingness to interact with Russian political figures known for their strong ties to the Kremlin. These engagements raise questions about his broader alignment with Moscow's interests. 8. Dismissal of Russian election interference. Vance has downplayed concerns about Russian interference in U.S. elections, dismissing allegations as exaggerated or politically motivated. Trump, while initially skeptical, later acknowledged the possibility of interference, albeit while downplaying its impact. Vance's outright dismissal aligns more closely with Russia's own denials of meddling. 9. Promotion of pro-Russian media narratives. Vance has shared and amplified narratives that mirror Russian state media's talking points, particularly regarding Ukraine, NATO, and U.S. foreign policy. While Trump has occasionally echoed some of these perspectives, his focus has been more on attacking domestic political opponents than on pushing Kremlin-aligned messaging. 10. Policy proposals favorable to Russian interests. Vance has proposed policies that would directly benefit Russia, such as withdrawing U.S. support for Ukraine, reducing NATO's presence, and shifting America's strategic focus away from countering Russian influence. Trump's policies, while sometimes aligning with Russian preferences, were not explicitly designed to favor Moscow. Conclusion. While both Trump and Vance have faced criticism for their views on Russia, Vance's positions suggest a more explicit alignment with Putin's interests. His direct opposition to U.S. aid to Ukraine, engagement with Russian-aligned figures, and skepticism toward NATO make him a stronger supporter of policies that benefit the Kremlin. As political debates over Russia's role in global affairs continue, Vance's stance will likely remain a point of contention.
Normally, we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
The leader, I forget exactly which official it was within the European Union, but sent Elon this threatening letter that basically said, we're going to arrest you if you platform Donald Trump, who, by the way, is the likely next president of the United States. So what America should be saying is, oh, if NATO wants us to continue supporting them, and NATO wants us to continue to be a good participant in this military alliance, why don't you respect American values and respect free speech?
Hey, I want to respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now the President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014,
In my private sector days was a technology investor in Silicon Valley. I haven't quite figured out how to work my government computer yet. So 30 days in, I'm going to have to wing this a little bit because I thought about what I was going to say on the morning over here. And that, of course, makes all the communications staff that are sitting backstage extremely nervous because they have no idea what I'm going to say. And before I went on, I talked to Luke, who's one of my main communications guys, and I said, Luke, this is all off the record.